Good morning. Thank you for taking the time to join us for our second webinar in the series on VMware alternatives. We are hosting today's webinar with our partner Scale Computing. At today's webinar, Mike Sullivan, Regional Sales Manager, and Tony Colangeli, Solutions Architect, will discuss how the Scale Computing platform unifies virtualization, storage, and compute into a single, highly available solution that's easy to deploy, manage, and scale. Joining Mike and Tony today is Ryan Young, Vandis' CTO, who will assist with questions. Before we get started, I'd like to remind everyone that this webinar is being recorded. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them in the Q&A window and we will address them as we go or at the end of the session. We also have a polling question today that we hope you'll take part in. And lastly, a quick reminder to visit our website, vandis.com/events, for other events you might be interested in. For those of you who are new to Vandis, Vandis specializes in optimizing and securing hybrid network infrastructures to achieve maximum value for our clients. With our proven process anchored by our deep industry knowledge, we deliver solutions and successful outcomes which cultivate strong connections and trust with our customers. For over 40 years, Vandis has delivered comprehensive strategies for secure IT infrastructures. We have partnered with Scale to offer our customers alternatives to VMware that can help to reduce costs and simplify hybrid IT. It's my pleasure to turn it over to Mike.
Thank you, Joanne, and thanks, Ryan, for the introduction. And thank you so much for everybody who joined our webinar today. We encourage questions, like Joanne said, so pop them in the Q&A. We're happy to address those as we go along. But yeah, I'll get it started here just with a quick definition of hyperconvergence. I'm sure this is a term that many of you have heard or maybe not. We take a different approach compared to many other vendors out there today in this space. Our definition of hyperconverge is really integrating that compute, storage, and virtualization layer together, where many of the other hyperconverged offerings out there, do the first two, the physical servers and the storage, but they still rely on VMware as that third-party hypervisor. And we all know what's happening today with Broadcom and VMware, licensing changes, core minimums, renewals being increased. And I'm sure many of you are affected by that on this call, and that's why you joined today. So just a brief background about Scale Computing. We've been around for quite some time, even though this might be the first time you've heard of us, but obviously Broadcom has shined a big light on Scale Computing the past few years as an alternative. But we've been around since 2008. We started as a scalable storage solution, ironically, to VMware, and then in 2012, we launched our hyperconverged platform. So we've been doing this for well over a decade here. The main goal of Scale Computing is really to simplify IT from a management perspective, deployment, updates, migration, you name it. When you see the UI today, when Tony, our solutions architect, brings that up, you can do pretty much any task in about 3 clicks. So all those buttons and knobs that you're used to on the VMware side of the house really go away. All those features that you don't really need for your day-to-day. The support, outside of the great support with Vandis, we partner with Vandis because one, they're certified in Scale. They do a great job helping clients collectively to move off of VMware to Scale Computing. But you also have the local support from Scale Computing, which is out of Indianapolis, 24/7, 365. We don't have tiered support. It doesn't matter if you're, the biggest hospital in the Northeast or the smallest dentist office. You call in, you're on the phone with an engineer in about 3 rings. They're going to give you an access code. You pop that into your platform. They're going to securely tunnel into your platform, remediate the issue for you, and call you when it's all set. The support doesn't stop just on the software side of the house. We are a hyperconverged platform, so we're bringing the hardware to the table. We don't build our own hardware. We white label it from the enterprise players out there today, like Dell, Lenovo, Supermicro, Intel. But none of that actually matters to you because when you get it, it's a Scale Computing appliance, and we frontline the support to that as well, which is local. So if you had a drive fail or if you had a whole server crash for whatever reason, you call in. Again, we ship parts next business day right out of the US. The second main thing of Scale is really providing high availability and redundancy across your organization to make sure that your data is protected in the event of a node down scenario or a failure. There's no downtime with Scale Computing. That is the goal. We have tens of thousands of different hardware configurations to fit different types of environments. We work with a variety of different organizations, from schools, towns, hospitals, entertainment, you name it, banking. we have the right fit for you on the hardware side of the house. From an alliance perspective, outside of just the hardware, we have great partnerships on the backup side of the house with Veeam and Acronis. We're very agnostic on that side of the house. So if you need to build a more robust business continuity plan with Scale, you can leverage some third-party backup vendors as well, like Vandis does. So again, we've been around for a long time, but we're not a big marketing company, right? You're not going to see us on big billboards or TV commercials. We put our money towards product innovation, research, and development. We are a tech-first company by all means. We want to make sure that we have the best platform out there and the best support model behind that, right? So we're not dumping a bunch of money into marketing. We're putting it right into the product, right? We have great third-party ratings and reviews. Several referenceable clients in the area. If you ever need to speak to someone who's made the move from VMware to Scale Computing, we're happy to set up those conversations for you. So this is what we call the Scale Computing platform. And this is made up of a few different components. HyperCore is our hypervisor. That's the replacement of the VMware hypervisor. So it's essentially KVM Linux under the hood. The cool thing about Scale Computing is it's one license model. We don't nickel and dime you for a feature set. It doesn't matter if you're on the smallest form factors that we offer or the largest servers that we offer. You have built-in snapshots, replication, and DR on that one license model. It's very self-healing and autonomous. And again, not too many clicks to get things done within that UI. Fleet Manager is our cloud management and monitoring tool. So for clients that typically have more than one location, maybe you have a production or a DR, or maybe you're an edge computing client where you have 100 or 1,000 locations and you need to see a single pane of glass and see what's going on within your environment. So it's a cloud management and monitoring tool that sees real-time metrics across your organization around storage consumption, RAM, CPU, things like that in real time, all the way down to the individual VM level. So it's a great reporting tool. You can also take the secure tunnel from Fleet Manager down to the local UI for more of that day-to-day management. And then the hardware, as you can see, we have a wide variety of hardware. I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide, but we have tens of thousands of different hardware configurations, all the way from very small to very large. And then the services piece, Vandis, Ryan might be able to speak to this a little bit more. They've done several migrations and deployments with Scale Computing at this point. So you do have the helping hand from Vandis, but you also have the helping hand from Scale Computing as well on the services side.
Yeah, I mean, while we're on this slide, Mike, I will say that we have, Mike was talking about kind of partnerships and the importance of partnerships. The really cool thing about the platform is it's very easy to deploy. It's very easy to migrate. I mean, it's our team has been able to do very fast migrations for customers that are under the gun to switch out quickly because of pricing or budget. But the other side of that is talking about what Mike was saying with support. I mean, the really cool thing about when we stand these boxes up for our customers, when our team's on the way home, we often get an email that says like, "Hey, this is Scale support. Just want to let you know that the cluster has passed all of its health checks and it's ready for migration." So like throughout the entire process, even for us as a partner or for our customers, Scale is there 100% of the way as an invested partner in the relationship.
Thank you, Ryan. So this is a traditional setup. You're going to see a poll pop up on this slide here. They'll ask you a question if you want to answer that while I'm talking through this. So this is the traditional setup. I'm sure many of you are running this setup today if you haven't adopted hyperconvergence, right? We call it the 3-2-1 approach. So, the physical servers in the middle, whether that's Dell, HP, Lenovo, whoever you like from a hardware perspective, down to a SAN, right? A storage appliance, something like a Pure, a Nimble, NetApp, and then VMware or Hyper-V or another hypervisor layered in amongst that. So this works, certainly not going away. But with the whole Broadcom VMware shakeup, this has become very, very expensive for clients, right? If you're not in that Fortune 500 company, you're not a focus for Broadcom anymore, right? So you're probably affected by the license increase and the change. And then outside of the price, I mean, it's very complex to manage. Like you see in the question in the poll, how many dedicated resources do you have managing your virtual infrastructure? So you look at this setup and you have multiple different vendors in there. So you have to have someone managing the hardware, right? You have to have someone managing the storage and also the virtualization layer. Some people have the manpower to do that. But if you're 1 to 10 people or 1 to 20 people, it can be a lot, and also juggling your day to day. Outside of that, support can get a little wonky, right? If something breaks, you might be working with multiple vendors to pinpoint that one issue. And then updates. You have to make sure everything is compatible with one another before you kick off an update, and you want to stay up to date because of security risks, right? So you want that to be streamlined, not a weekend thing, not after hours. You want to be able to do it when you want. So we basically took that left-hand model, we moved it to the right. We start with a 3-node cluster to start with Scale Computing. We build everything N+1, right? High availability and redundancy is a key point of our platform. So we want you to run on those 2 nodes, and that 3rd node is really for that high availability and redundancy sake. But we're giving you a single pane of glass, a single UI to manage your compute, your memory, your storage, your virtualization. We're giving you 1 license model with all the features built in. We're giving you 1 support model as well. So both on the software and the hardware side of the house. So let's say if one of these servers were to fail for whatever reason, all those applications and workloads are going to move to the next server. You're going to call into support, no disruption to your business. Everything's going to continue to run, and we're going to ship you a new server next business day. This works the same for updates, right? We completely streamline that process at Scale Computing. So no more blocking off weekends. Unless you'd like to work on the weekend, you can continue to do that. No more after hours. So it's a single click, non-disruptive rolling update process at Scale Computing. Since we take that hyper-converged approach, we're bringing the hardware with the software together. You click 1 button, and all those applications and workloads are going to live migrate from that top server down to the next one. We're going to update the firmware, update the software, and roll right through the cluster for you. So we have clients that can do it in the middle of the day, or if you're in the office, you click that button. By the time you pull into your driveway, that system is fully updated for your organization with nothing outside of that 1 click. Ryan, is there anything that you'd like to add on that slide?
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing that I want to call out here, and it's something that one of our customers shared with us the other day after migration. We did a check-in to see how their team's doing, what's going on, and it's really pertinent to this poll. We did a quick training for them after cutover, and we asked them, how much time it took to get their system admins up to pace and deploying VMs and managing VMs in Scale. And the customer surprised us with the answer of 15 minutes. And they didn't need any further training. And when we kind of pushed into it, they don't have to manage virtual switches. They don't have to manage the SANs. It's all just 1 UI. You spin up a machine, and Anthony will show us in a few minutes, but it doesn't get more simple than that.
Thank you, Ryan. And I'm looking at the answers here. It looks like nobody has more than 10 people managing their infrastructure. So that says a lot. You have a lot of hats that you're wearing, it seems like, in most of these organizations. So this slide really breaks down architecturally how we compare to other hyper-converged vendors out there in the space. So left-hand side, competitors like Nutanix, Dell, VxRail, HP SimpliVity. Again, all great products, but more enterprise heavy products, expensive, heavy software, and I'll break down why. The left-hand model, essentially what they do is they virtualize the SAN into the stack. They run it as a controller VM. So a large VM on each one of the servers. That controller VM is probably enough resources to power a small business before you actually get to utilize that hardware to run your virtual machines, right? So that allows them to scale out to 100 servers in a single cluster, but can be very heavy, very expensive. But the big piece there is they still rely on that third-party hypervisor, right? That's how they architected it. That's why it's a very heavy system. They wanted to be able to run VMware, within that stack. We took a different approach to hyperconverged. Again, we were a storage company before this, so we built our hypervisor right on top of our storage technology, and we have a single pool of storage across the cluster where all that data is mirrored and striped. So the data path flows through more efficiently. We take a fraction of the resources to actually run our software, so you get to utilize your hardware for your virtual machines. But that's why we can fit on things as small as, the Intel NUCs, the height of a Dunkin' Donuts cup, which is great for small businesses or remote sites. You know, you have hundreds of sites, stores, things like that. We can fit in very small form factors where, you know, not too many other people can. Tony, I'll let you jump in on this one here.
Yeah. So, really that left-hand model, call it generic virtual storage appliance model, is really the path that most hyperconverged vendors took to market. Typically, piggybacking off of an established hypervisor, VMware Hyper-V. Basically they had to place all their storage technology into a virtual machine because they couldn't touch the hypervisor that wasn't theirs. Um, Doing that, it works, but at the end of the day, most of those solutions start at 32 plus gigs of RAM per node, oftentimes asking for dedicated CPU cores that you still have to license for other software, even though they're dedicated to running storage functions. Um, really that solution is just heavy for a vast majority of workloads out there. Um, you know, you take a look at the scale side here. We took a little bit of a different path. We were from the ground up meant to be hyperconverged. We started with Linux and KVM, open source technologies. Took an established storage technology that we developed in-house, building storage appliances, layered that all together into really our own Linux distribution. We call that HyperCore. Uh, but what you really get is the tightly integrated, highly efficient stack that starts at around 4 gigs of RAM per node for system resources. So not only does that give us a lot of flexibility when we scale that solution up and out, but it does also give us the ability to scale down to very small. Um, the left hand side here, we call that the edge, right? Branch offices, retail locations, minimal compute, minimal storage, but at the end of the day, we still want to keep our workloads highly available. So we can actually run as small as 3 Intel NUCs, give you full high availability, redundant storage, VM live migrations, all of those things that traditionally you were looking at either three larger servers or three servers in a SAN. Now that fits in a nice little 2U 14-inch deep rack mount. But we also have our solutions to the right there, the more traditional data center gear, 1U servers, up to 64 cores, 2 terabytes of RAM per node. The 3000 series is all NVMe, so we can also do that high performance storage where we need it.
And Anthony, how large can your clusters go from a horizontal scaling standpoint?
We can go to 8 nodes in a cluster. We're not really capped on drives other than the 5000 series there. That's a 2U 12 drive tiered storage system. The 3000 series can do 10 30 terabyte NVMe disks with our latest revision. So we can get pretty dense on the storage for a small package.
Awesome.
Perfect. There's really two sides of the business that the platform is relevant to, right? The core data center, that's mostly what we've been talking about on this call, right? In the core data center, replacing, the physical host with the SAN, with the traditional VMware setup. So great fit there, can save you a lot of money, save you a lot of time from the management side of the house. But the distributed enterprise is another big focus from Scale Computing. So let's say you have many locations out there. Maybe you're a retail chain, or you have a bunch of remote sites, you're an energy company. Like Tony was saying on that last slide, we can fit very small for local compute. And that fleet manager is very relevant in those situations, right? You have 100 locations across the country or globally. We can fit on these small form factors to keep that local high availability and compute down at the edge. And that fleet manager, you could see everything under that single pane of glass, and you'll see this on the fleet manager demo. If you need to typically do a deployment like that, with other competitors, you're rolling out trucks to every location. We have this really neat feature on Fleet Manager called zero touch provisioning. So you can actually pop it right into that Fleet Manager UI, have everything pre-configured and ship it out to the site directly. And someone just plugs in, the power cord and the networking, and you could stand it up from across the country. So it saves you a lot of time from a deployment perspective. gives you that single pane of glass for real-time metrics for over 50,000 locations. Ryan, I don't know if there's anything you want to hit on there, but those are the two focuses really from Scale Computing.
No, I think really on this one, Fleet Manager is the key to it, right? But having that single pane of glass to manage infrastructure everywhere is really fantastic.
And then you should see another poll pop up on this slide here. But business continuity, right? So this is top of mind. The features that you're using currently today with VMware, do you need all those features? Are you using all those features? If you're not using all those features, you're paying for them, right? Again, with Scale Computing, we have that one license model. We looked at the core features that organizations need to run their day-to-day, and we keep it simple, right? Built-in snapshots, replication, and DR right into that one license model. So there's no upgrade path with Scale Computing. Again, doesn't matter if you're a very small client or a very large client, you have those features at your fingertips. It doesn't matter what form factor you fall into. So let's say, for example, a client that has the typical 2-site setup with Scale Computing. Site 1 is your production. Start with a 3-node cluster. That's a minimum there for production. You could take snapshots and replicate over to site 2. Now you could have a mirrored setup. If you'd like to set it up that way, you can do cross replication between sites. But if you don't want to break the bank on DR and do a mirrored setup, we can fit on single nodes. We could architect this appropriately to your business needs. Maybe it's your most mission critical workloads that you absolutely need in that DR scenario, and we could fit it on a single node to replicate to. If you want more disaster recovery in the cloud, maybe you don't have a second site, but you want to make sure that your data is protected somewhere else. So we have a partnership with Google Cloud. You don't need to know anything about Google Cloud. It looks and feels just like a Scale node would from a management perspective, but we call it Cloud Unity. So it's essentially disaster recovery in the cloud as a service for those clients that don't have a secondary site. And then you can keep that local backup strategy, right? We partner with various of different vendors in that space. We always recommend that third-party backup, right? Vandis does a great job piecing things together for that true business continuity play for their organizations. And the poll reads, what features are you using in VMware today? And many people that we talk to are really only using the core features. Tony, anything you want to add here? Ryan?
No, I think maybe Joanne, if you can close the poll just so we can talk to that. But I think the number of times that we go into customers and talk about what exactly they have going on, they might have full boat licensing of VMware, but at the end of the day, they're actually nothing's turned on. Some are using DRS. Mostly people are using vSAN and ESX with vCenter, and that's really it. So it's really it's really interesting to get in these conversations with people where all of a sudden they're like, I actually don't need these big bundles from VMware. And the poll actually supports that. Is
Yep.
no one's really using the advanced feature sets that make VMware so costly.
Yep. That's a good point, Ryan. All right, Tony.
Yeah. So, this is where we really get into, what does it take to put one of these clusters together? Looking at the little diagram on the right side there, obviously we got to link these together with some type of networking. Really 2 types of networking at play here. For all the non-edge solutions, we're really looking at a 4-port network card per node. That way we can do a full redundant mesh here. Basically we split that into 2 categories. One, the backplane network. Really that is where we do all the hyperconverged infrastructure side. So things like blocks of storage between nodes, VM live migrations, all those things. Each node really has a low-level process called a state machine that handles managing the cluster and working in conjunction with each other to do that over that backplane network. The LAN side networking, we keep very simple. Really, you trunk your production VLANs down to those LAN network ports. Each virtual network adapter on your VMs has the ability, you set a VLAN tag. There's no vSwitches at play here. It's all bridge networking between the switches. So at the end of the day, we take 3 layers of abstraction out of the traditional VMware deployment. Uh, giving you some simplicity, but also some flexibility. Um, the storage, basically, we take all that local storage. It's stitched into one big raw storage pool. No RAID controllers at play here. This is all done in software. So each individual virtual disk or each individual physical disk is managed by Scribe, our scale computing reliable independent block engine. Uh, it then you present your virtual disk out to your virtual machine. Then we handle all of the data mirroring and striping from there. So we're going to take that block of data off of that virtual disk. We're going to write two redundant copies, 2 separate disks, 2 separate nodes. That way, no matter if a disk fails or even an entire node fails, there's a live copy of that data somewhere else in the cluster to keep your workloads online. So, starting at that day one, pull those nodes out of the box, get them cabled up. Basically, you set 6 IP addresses, a LAN and a backplane IP on each node, and you have a cluster built in, about an hour. So, very easy to get deployed here. With that, if I can transition into the demo, unless Ryan or Mike have anything else they want to bring up before we get
Tony,
there.
we have 2 questions.
Sure.
First one is 3 nodes, 1 node dedicated as HA. Difference between the HC 3000 compared to the HC 5000.
Yeah. So to build a cluster, we require 3 nodes. They're not really dedicated to HA, but we will give you warnings if you exceed the resources of 2 nodes so that you have enough room to fail over in the event of a failure. But all 3 nodes are live and can execute VMs at all times.
Okay. Can we also talk about the right sizing process? Like when a customer comes to you, do you say like, all right, let's pull data out of VMware and look at things and right size you into an appliance, or do customers just come to you and say, I want an HC 3000 with X amount of storage, and we go from there?
Yeah, definitely right sizing is always, especially when you're changing up your platform, right sizing is, a key thing to consider. A lot of environments are coming back off of the old way when everything was socket based and we weren't really counting cores. Obviously the world's a little different today. Everything goes on a core based license pretty much. Um, so when we do look at an opportunity, we're definitely pulling some metrics out. We'll use a Dell Live Optics collector or an RV tools or some type of metrics, and have that interactive process with the customer to right size their environment, factor in some growth, and really make sure that we're getting you the right solution and not just throwing a bunch of resources at you because we can.
Yeah, and to answer that other question, Ryan, about the difference between 3000 and 5000 series. So the 3000 series is a traditional 1U chassis and is all NVMe. The HC 5000 is a 2U chassis, tiered or all spinning options. And both come in single or dual proc options as well. So the difference really is all NVMe compared to a tiered system, 1U versus 2U.
Yeah, CPU and memory profiles are pretty similar between the two. It's really about the drive configuration.
Yep.
The other question is VDI. How does it work on your platform, and what does it look like with licensing?
Yeah, so VDI, we have 2 alliance partnerships with some VDI brokers. The 2 are Parallels, their remote access server product, and LeoStream is another VDI broker that works with us. They plug into our APIs and are able to handle all the VDI features. From a Microsoft licensing perspective, it's pretty much the same across the board, no matter who you're using for Microsoft licensing or who you're using for your VDI platform. You know, there's not a lot of different advantages to that.
And
All right, I guess with that, let's jump over to the demo.
Yeah, and I will add on the VDI side of the house, Leo Stream and Parallels, what Tony just brought up, we actually sell and support that at Scale Computing. So that's not another third-party vendor that you need to work with separately.
Oh, that's great.
So jumping into the demo here, going to start here with Fleet Manager. So, this is your single pane of glass, cloud-based. You can see 1 to 50,000 clusters in here, depending on how many you have. Really, you're greeted with a dashboard, give you some high-level stats on all your environments. That health status is really generated from what conditions are coming out of your clusters. These are info, error warning messages that the clusters are displaying. Version info, what firmware do you have out in your environment? Obviously, we want to keep these at least relatively up to date. This being a demo environment, we've got a pretty good mix in here. But I do want to take us back to that deployment scenario. You've got a cluster, you want to deploy it. Maybe you've got a cluster you need to deploy across the country. Yes, you can initialize them locally, but we can also do that zero-touch provisioning process where if we create a cluster here, we can define core network info. We can actually pick up, and you don't even have to have the nodes powered on yet. You can pick up nodes from your inventory, add those to this deployment, define all of your networking here, and hit this create cluster button. And then that cluster configuration sits in a staging area. All you need is someone to plug those devices in on site. They need to grab a DHCP address and reach our provisioning server, and that cluster actually initializes for you. From there, it'll appear in your deployed clusters list. We can actually go into any one of these clusters. We can see high level stats, utilization. We do track a lot of historical utilization here. And then, also we can see individual node stats, a list of all the VMs, and more importantly, especially when we talk 1 or 2 clusters here, one, we can push our updates right from here. So you want to update your cluster to the latest production firmware release. Maybe you want a beta release. You hit that start update button. As long as we're talking a highly available cluster, we do support the single node scenarios for certain deployments, but you can actually trigger that update and we'll go through that non-disruptive update process right from the cloud. The other key feature here, go to cluster button. Most of your day-to-day management's done from the local interface of the cluster. We don't need a VPN connection to get to that. We can hit this go to cluster button. We call this secure link. It actually securely tunnels you down to the local UI of that cluster. And with that, this is the HyperCore UI. This is where you spend most of your time, most of your day-to-day. If we take Fleet Manager out of the picture, as I'm connected here, we can actually go to any one of these LAN IPs of the cluster. We're going to see the same UI no matter where you go. There's no central management server that you have to keep online. There's no vCenter. If you had to shut your cluster down for whatever reason, you don't have to worry about which host your vCenter's on, so you can make sure that it starts. The cluster really, each node is very autonomous, but also cluster aware here. Across top, we've got a nice high level dashboard. All your cluster-wide resources are here. So these are 12 core nodes, 36 in total. RAM utilization. We get disk from a raw perspective here. So 22.6 terabytes total, 12.9 terabytes written to disk. Our real actual data on disk is essentially half of that, because we are writing that redundant copy. If we go into some detail here, we do see the VM data. This is the current state of your virtual machines, what's being consumed by snapshots. Efficiency goes into our deduplication ratios. We have a post-process deduplication that happens, ultimately saving you space. And the provisioning tab takes a look at, what do you have provisioned out here? Because Scribe only allocates blocks of data as they're written, everything on the platform's then provisioned. One more decision out of the process of creating a VM. You don't have to worry about how you're provisioning it. We're handling all that for you. Notifications, any of those conditions the cluster would show here. Those would appear here. The cluster can email those to you. There's a million different ways we can monitor the cluster. But if you get something, you need some support chat here. This is how you contact support if you're not calling Ryan. Phone number, email, all the information to contact support. And one of the first things they do, they're going to give you a tunnel code. You pop that tunnel code in, that builds a secure tunnel back to the support team. They can get in, get right to work on your issue. You're not going to tie your workstation up with a Zoom session or anything. Building a VM here, super simple. If you can create a VM here, if you can fill out this form, you can create a VM. We'll give it the name Vandis. The tag system is really how we organize things in the UI here. Anything after the first one here, the group, that's really the heading where the card for the VM appears in the UI. Anything after that, just a property of the VM that you can use for searching, taking bulk actions, things like that. We keep operating system really simple. Basically, Windows operating systems need some drivers installed, so we'll automatically give you that driver's disk. Linux and BSD or have it built right into the platform, right into the kernel on anything relatively modern. We do have a compatibility layer with emulated virtual hardware. If you do have a legacy system, you have to get running. We've seen everything from OS2 Warp and Novell NetWare, Windows 2000. All those things can run on us. We do have the official support statement of, it needs to be currently supported by the software manufacturer for full support, but we're not going to intentionally prevent you from running something legacy. Full UEFI support, also a virtual trusted platform module here, important for things like Windows 11, BitLocker encryption inside of your VMs, all those things. CPUs, we do put you on some rails. We won't let you assign more CPUs than you have threads in the smallest system in your cluster. So we've got 12 core, 24 thread machines here. And then, the memory, we do allocate all of our memory on VM boot. We don't let you do dynamic memory or shared memory with anything. So we do that. CPU memory, powered off operations to adjust those. You do have to shut the VMs down for that. Disk, we can dynamically, we can add disk space, we can add new disks without taking the VMs offline. Boot from, this is mounting another ISO. There's a shared media library in the settings menu where you pick your ISO to build your VM. Once you click create, happens very fast, really in about 10 seconds. No real allocations to disk or anything that need to happen, so that comes online very quickly. From there, we power it on. And
Anthony, can you just show the networking piece?
oh yeah. So we can hop over here. If you did need to get that onto a different network, here's your virtual network adapter. You can go in here, set your VLAN tag if you do need to get it onto a different network. When you power that VM on, it does the cluster makes an evaluation where to put the VM based on free resources in the cluster. So we take a look at that. Now that VM's up and running, it picked the first node. We'll hit the console, and of course we missed the Windows Windows installer there, but we'll reboot that and grab the Windows installer so you can see the console come up. But there we go. There we go. Now we're into Windows. Really from there, it's business as usual. Like I said, you will have to install the high performance VirtIO drivers for the VirtIO hardware as part of the installer, but um, pretty standard stuff, even with VMware if you want to use their high performance.
Easy to do. It takes 2 minutes.
Yep.
So, you were saying this is where you spend your day to day. What else is there to do?
If you did need to live migrate a VM, you want to move it off to another node, you can do that. I think really the other important thing here is our snapshots and potentially replication. Depending on what your needs are. Our snapshots are fundamentally different from your traditional VMware snapshot of old. This is more akin to taking a snapshot on your SAN. So we're only tracking change blocks, so we can actually run on snapshots. We actually encourage you to run on snapshots. We can do 5,000 snapshots to a VM with no real performance hit here. That traditional VMware snapshot really is essentially a replay log of all the writes to disk. So if you write a block of data 6 times, there's 6 entries in that snapshot file. When you have to consolidate that, there's a long replay process. That's really where we run into a lot of performance issues. Because we're tracking and heat mapping all of our data, we're only looking at essentially 2 states: the state of the data at the snapshot and the current state. So we can also be a lot more space efficient. We do give you the ability to schedule those snapshots so the system manages them for you. So we could go here, we can pick any one of these snapshot schedules. We can define different layers of recurrence, daily, hourly, minutely, retention policies. This also governs our replication, so you can also specify different settings for the replicated snapshots. Once you have schedules defined, it's really easy. You go onto that VM, you pick that schedule. Here's an every 10-minute schedule. We'll assign that. Now the system's going to manage taking those snapshots, automatically clean them up, and you'll then have points in time that you could recover from if you ever needed to. Similarly, you want to set up a replica to another scale node or cluster. Go in here. You need site-to-site connectivity. You give it some information on your cluster. Now you have that relationship to replicate to. From there, you tell your VM, well, I want to replicate here. Now, based on that schedule that's assigned to that VM, replication will happen as well. So now that we've got snapshots running, I'm actually going to jump to this VM that's got a little bit more of an interesting story. Here's our every 10-minute snapshots. We want to recover from one of those. Super easy to do. Here's 10:10 a.m. We can clone that VM, decide what we want to do with our networking here. Got to have a unique name. We'll clone that we'll clone that and be able to bring it online really in a couple of seconds here. Maybe you don't need to clone the whole VM. You just want to grab a file off of a disk or test against some data. Not only can we clone that virtual disk, an individual virtual disk, to the source machine, we can also pick any other virtual machine in the cluster and clone that disk over there. So there's the 60 and the 600 that I provisioned the VM with. There's that 10.5 gig drive that I just cloned over. So super easy to get those replicas going, or to get those snapshots and work with those. And replicas are really the same way. We can hop over to our other scale node here. You see, we actually do this. This is a quite frequent story. DR replication, expensive insurance plan that you hope to never have to use. So a lot of times we don't require HA in a DR cluster. So a lot of times we can define the resources needed to bring an environment up for DR, fit it all into one node, and give you a single node and hopefully reduce your hardware cost. Here's our incoming replicas. You see, you can't power those on. Same clone process. We can go in here, pick which snapshot we want to use, decide what we want to do with our networking, do a quick clone, and that VM will be ready to power on in seconds. We can also use our tags to our advantage and actually, clone off of just a given tag, power on off of a given tag. So, even if this is a manual process to fail over, you can do it pretty quickly with minimal interaction.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah. I mean, we touched on that update process. I think that's probably the other piece. If you do trigger that update process, this is your last button that you click to update the entire cluster. If it is an update that requires the nodes to reboot, automatic live migration of all the VMs off of a given node, we'll patch it, get its updates done, do a health check. Once it's rejoined the cluster, we'll move on to node number 2, node number 3. We'll move right down the line. When it's all said and done, all your VMs will be put back on the nodes they started on, and your cluster's fully up to date at that point.
Awesome. So with only a few minutes left, is there anything else you want to show us, or should we open this up for any questions that people might have?
I think I've showed everything that I need to show at this point. I think Q&A is probably a good place to go.
I agree.
All right. So with time left, are there any questions from anyone on the webinar? Any further questions other than the ones that are already been asked? All right. I can actually answer this one for you. The question was, how do you access the management console? So you access the management console by going to either the fleet manager and clicking on jump to the management console, or going to any of the IPs you see on Tony's screen. You have the IP addresses of each one of the nodes. You can go to any of those 3 and it brings you into the management console of the cluster. So there's no VM that has to run in order to manage the nodes. The nodes manage themselves and support their own UI. Can you fail a single VM to the DR site without failing over entirely?
Yes. Yeah. It's really at a per VM level. So absolutely. You can clone any individual VM and bring it up on the other side.
Public cloud, do you support Azure or AWS?
We don't really have anything in the public cloud. Entra, we can do SSO with Entra. So if you need to, you want to use Entra as an OpenID provider, you can do all your authentication through that.
Okay, cool. And then in regards to backup solutions, you mentioned partnership with backup solutions. If the customer has backup solutions that weren't in that list that you had, how can you back up outside of the Scale environment?
So we obviously have that backup API. Currently, the only 3 vendors that have that implemented are Acronis, Storeware, and most recently Veeam. Outside of that, outside of the agentless integrations there, we can obviously support anything in guest agent. So the list goes on and on there. We've had Unitrends and Datto and many other solutions out there. But those are the big 3 that have agentless backup API integrations in the wild.
All right. I think with that, Joanne.